So I'm gonna talk about my project first. It's about the thing in the middle, like this thing. It's called a vaquita, and it means cow in Spanish. Because for some weird reasons, they think that this thing looks like a cow, which doesn't make much sense to me. I think it looks like a panda a little bit more if you look at the eye and stuff. But this is not the most correct representation there ever is, because I made this and it's like not this is as far as I can go, but the real thing look cuter than this. But it's all about vaquitas, and vaquitas is like a critically endangered animal and only live in San Felipe, Mexico, and it's like the California Bay kind of area. If you go like drive down from California, like it's about like an hour to Mexicali and about 2 hours from Mexicali. So that's kind of where the geolocation is. And while this animal is critically endangered, as in right now as we're speaking, there are probably like about 10 left in the world, and we couldn't figure out like exactly where they are. So the project is about it was initially starting off as a biology project when I was in the second year of college in marine lab. So the first kind of half of my experience with this project is purely scientific. So I make my decisions and judgments of like conservation plans based on what I read. So I before like last year I haven't even been there before. So it was purely based on what I read and based on what I hear from my professor, because he was like this person that is really into the conservation of Akitas and is like a very like important person in the conservation of Akitas. And then I decided to apply for MFA and decided to use this as my thesis because back then I was thinking that media and photograph and film are more powerful than the scientific papers themselves, because, well, I might be wrong, but people don't just go around laying on the sofa and be like, okay, let's read a scientific paper about this finding that we're doing, and let's see those charts, let's look at those like pie diagrams and do some analysis on the sofa. I don't think people do that because like it doesn't make any sense to me. But people buy photo books, people buy storybook, they read novels, they like to read stories in a way that is like more approachable and more like less technical jargon than just scientific papers. And also like scientific papers are about like introduction, method, and then you have like case studies, you have like representations, and then you have a conclusion. It's like what you need to know if you want to know about a study, but it doesn't include any stories behind the study. It doesn't tell you how they conduct the research, and tell you like what they're interacting with in like the local kind of settings. A lot of them just don't have that kind of information because, well, in the scientific settings, it's not the most it's not the most kind of information that is represented out than the scientific findings. So I decided to make like a our project about this, but also infuse like science into this thing. And so that's where the project initially coming from. But I was working with Sea Shepherd. I don't know if you've heard of Sea Shepherd, but it's like a nonprofit organization working on conservation all over the globe. And then I contacted them and asked them if I could do like a documentary film, which was initially the plan, on board one of their ship in Operation Milagro, which dedicates to save the vaquitas. And said, yes, sure, I can get you on board for like 4 days and all. And I was like, okay, cool. And I landed in Mexico, and I texted them. They're like, okay, so situation has coming up. I might not get you on the ship at all if the best thing I could do is probably like 1 day or 2 days. Like, what about the week? Like, I'm gonna stay here for the week. This is my thesis. I'm probably not gonna come back. And you're telling me I'm not getting on a ship. So great. And that's how I started to go around and talk to the people in town, talk to the fishermen in town, and also travel like about a 3-hour driving radius around the town, going out to look at whales and everything. And then I realized that like this whole situation is not just about Akitas and it's not just about saving them, but it's also about how this little animal, like only 12, 10 of them left in the world, is affecting a bigger community. And that community is way bigger than I would ever think about. And that's why I have this right now. It's called When We Save Akitas, What Are We Talking About? Because we're not just talking about Akitas. We're not just talking about biology. We're talking about livelihood. We're talking about science. We're talking about drug cartels. We're talking about organization crimes. We're talking about like the whole like package deal of what is going on. This is kind of the start of this project and how it developed until like right now, as you can see, like that. Can you hear me? Oh, you just muted yourself. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. Because I'm like, I'm talking, but okay, cool. Anywho, so vaquitas are endangered not because people want to kill it, it's because people want to kill something else. And then they just got caught in the net because their shape, their like body type and how big they are, like, and the places that they live, like all the aspects, vaquitas are very similar to a fish called totoaba. And people are trying to sell totoaba fish bladder on black market, which is the price of the gold in black market. So what happened is that well, initially it was about saving vaquita. So Mexico government issued a fishing ban on the entire Sea of Cortez, like a certain area of Sea of Cortez, and it resulted in if fishermen want to legally fish, they have to like take their ship and go out for like about a couple of hours before they could actually legally fish, and it's just not very profitable. And then that town is like 90% population fishermen, which caused like very complicated situation around there because the government didn't give them money for compensation for them not to fish, but then the money they receive from the government is not nearly like the same kind of amount for them if they are like generating profit from fishing. And there was like it was like a already established route of like smuggling from like that part of Mexico to all over the world, and then they just decided to utilize that channel that is already existing to illegally fish for totoaba bladders. And that's how everything happened. Like the government issued a ban and the fishermen are out of their livelihood, and then they make deals with like local cartels to loan out nets to get totoabas out there, and then they bring back the bladder and then bring back the bladder to the cartel to pay off the nets so they can go out and do profit again. And then on the other side, the cartel is basically drying all the bladders and then ship them onto the black markets. So that's like kind of the whole chain, which that's why like this vaquita thing is complicated because like it is just collateral damage. And by saving the vaquitas, we create even more collateral damage in the society kind of side. So my project is like based off a book that I wrote, and it has like 4 different parts. So it's a fiction. It's a fictional book, but it's based on real stories. So like the stories are real, like a lot of conversations are real. I just made like edits to basically put a collective of stories onto a same fictional character. So like there are maybe like 10 different stories happen on 10 different people on Sea Shepherd. But for like this whole purpose of having this book coming along and everything is like clear and not like confusing, because it will be really confusing for you to follow like 10 people in the same organization in the entire like book. And that is why combine them to like one character and have this kind of like a fictional edit to it. And then each character's story, I'm so sorry. Get out of here, please. Thank you very much. Ugh. Get up. Ugh.
It's okay to see cats. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. So what happens is that so each section of the book is the first person narrative of that particular fictional character. So it has more authenticity to it, but it goes from like a fisherman and a biologist, a person in the Sea Shepherd, and a student. So it kind of go off from like 4 lines over there and talk and start from like 1958 when the creature was first described scientifically, and then end in the book at 2020 where there are only like about 10 of them left in the world. So that's how the book goes, and then the exhibition kind of goes as, I don't know if I have a photo of that, but there is like a, so it's the Jameson Gallery, and it has like a wall at front, like this part, and then that part kind of act as the index of a book. So like the front has like this quote of the 4 respective the 4 like stories in like well, the order is random because I don't want this to be read like on a particular order, so I just have these 4 names and then the quote of each character to kind of set up the base of what is going on. And then on the back side of the wall, if I have a photograph, I definitely have a photograph. Okay, so this is like the backside of the same wall, but it's just the same names. And just so that it's like convenient that you don't have to walk back and forth to know like kind of which person you're following. And so each person has this line, and then this entire like design of the exhibition hall is something that I like based off from a physics lecture that I was in. So when Einstein believed the theory of relativity is that everybody has a world line, and they're like time that they experience is relative instead of like definite. So like a very like it's not the most like precise way of saying it, but if you think about time and space as a graph, so time is y-axis, and then space is x-axis, and then if you travel through time and you plot a point wherever you are in that time in that particular space, then theoretically if we all start at the same time but we go through different space and we end up at the same time, our graph would look different. And that line between all the points that we plotted about the space and time that we're in is the world line. So theoretically, if you're starting from the same point and ending at the same point in time, because of the different places that you travel, you experience relatively different time. So that's kind of like the idea that I have for this exhibition, like this exhibition, is that everybody kind of started off at their own pace and then end the story on the point of 2020, like the new decade. But because of their experience and because of the point and perspective they take into the story, as you can see the different lines of so they started at the same point on the same wall, and then they all converged at the Akita sculpture. But then in the middle, they are like kind of going to different places and doing different things, and that represent each person's world line, that they're all tackling the same problem. They're all facing different like obstacles. Even if they start and end at the same point, they experience different relative time and they have different world line. So that's kind of the design of the exhibition. And on the side walls are just separated stories. So I section out the walls, and each section is representing one person's story. And then you can see like the colored line going into that. And then it's like my aim is for you to pretty clearly to follow one person's story by just following the actual lines. And on the back wall is when everything come together. So like the main line is the student, which is based off my story. So what happens is that on the back wall, the student travel through different places and talk to different people, and she meets with each person on the front wall. So she is kind of like the needle and thread that puts everything together. That's why, like on the very back, if you can see this like the Akita part, like everything converge into the back wall, because the back wall is the road trip, and then when she meets everyone. And so the Sea Shepherd story is mostly about, oh yeah, bye. The Sea Shepherd story is mostly about this young volunteer that goes on Sea Shepherd and turns out to be there for a couple of years. And then in the meantime, they their job is to drag illegal nets out of the water, and that's just what they do every day. And so he experienced like the initial like finding the nets, dragging the nets, the whole routine. And then they found like 57 dead sharks in one net, and they couldn't save any of them. And then they also found like about 20 something total lava fish. Like, is it 20? It's like a lot. I put down the note somewhere, but I couldn't find. But it's like a lot of total lava fish in one net that is just like separating from each other, and they managed to save all of them, among with other like little like rays and like other fish and animals. And then the last bit was when they got attacked by fishermen. So fishermen actually assemble all of their pangas and then throw rocks at them, and they have to like fight off the rock with like water guns and everything. And then they have military on board, but the military are not allowed to shoot. But that's like, and then at night they put their drones out to see if anybody is setting up illegal nets in that certain area, and their drones were discovered and got shot down by one of the fishermen with a shotgun. But that's kind of the whole Sea Shepherd story. And then the biologist story is just that he was born the same year that Akita was scientifically described, and then got invited into the study of Akitas in graduate school. And then he participated in a conservation effort called Akita CPR. So basically what they want to do is to capture vaquita and then see if they can breed them in the captive settings and then re-release them out in the water. Like there has releasing like marine mammals specifically back to the natural habitat is like a very difficult thing to do, and it hasn't been a lot of successful so there hasn't been a lot of successful re-release back to the wild if the marine mammal is born in captive like environment. But they decided that, I mean, there are only like about 30 of them left back then, and they think that is worth it to try because we can always figure out how to get them back in the wild, but we can't figure out how to make them live if they all die out. That's kind of the logic. But they did that, and then they captured a female, put them back in the facility, and then the female died eventually because vaquita is kind of like dolphins. Like they don't breathe like we do. What they do is that they decide to breathe, and then they breathe, and then if they panic and they forgot to breathe, and they die. And that's why it's like very and then the female vaquita just panicked, and then she hasn't been breathing for like a certain degree of time, so they decided to release her on spot, and then she left. Everybody was happy and be like, okay, we just need to try again. But then the female came back like just very fast, like just swim towards the barrier, and then she just didn't know where she was going. She was like totally panicking, and eventually she died. And then turned out she was like a very old female. But because if there are like 500 left and they killed one, it's like they have room to try again. But if there are like 30 left and they killed one, they just shut down the entire program. But that's kind of the biologist storyline. And then the fisherman storyline is basically about them being like a happy family, and they have like a stable livelihood. They're sending the girls to school. But this fishing ban came in, and then he was out of a job, so his wife was like forced to go out and do some like very sell like those little like gadgets to the tourists, which is like a very very difficult job. And then eventually, like because of the financial burden, and he doesn't want his wife to be like out there with carrying like a ton cases of like sunglasses and sell them like $1 a piece to the tourist. He decided to join one of his old friend for illegally fishing the tolava bladders. So that's kind of the storyline of 4 different stories where they started off, and then everything converged in like the student kind of section where she meets everyone and hear everybody's story, and then realize that there is no good guys or bad guys in this story, and there is no like pure black and white in this story. It's just a story of everybody trying to live. Vaquitas are trying to live, trying to survive. Like biologists is trying to help vaquitas to survive, and then fishermen also needed to survive. They're not like just bad guys that throw rocks at sea shepherd, but they make their choices also because they needed to survive. So it's about a story of survival instead of a story to just protect a certain animal. Because there's also this thing about value, about commercial value and scientific value. Because when we think about it, like everything has value when it starts to be rare. But why is it that tolavas, they are less rare than vaquitas, but why do they have more value than vaquitas that people wanted to sacrifice kind of vaquitas to earn money off tolava bladder? Is it because the trade-off between scientific value and commercial value? So tolavas is rare because they generate a lot of money from commercial values, but vaquitas are rare and they only generate like scientific value. So there has been like plans and like debate about like ecotourism in the entire area, so that like the idea was like if we generate enough commercial value for the vaquitas, then the commercial value of both items could trade off, and maybe like that could be some like alternative way of earning money for the local fishermen and stuff. But the local place is just not the best place for ecotourism because of Akita's like hiding mechanism. What they do is that they are only in that little bay where it's like super muddy and nobody can see what is going on underwater, because in that case, sharks also can't see them and whales also can't see them. It's like kind of their defense mechanism, but it's also making it very, very hard to like have an ecotourism in the first place. And they also don't porpoise like dolphins really much. They don't like to like, so dolphins have a behavior that they just tag along ships, and because the wave generated by the ship is going to make it easier for them to actually swim. But that's why like ecotourism with dolphins is a lot like probably like easier because they are more in population in general, and they have this certain behavior that increase the chance of people seeing ecotourism. So kind of vaquita is like in a very muddy water, and they only come out with like half a dorsal fin. It's really hard to spot, and also there are only like about 12 of them left in the world. So that 3 thing combined together is more or less like just hard for anyone to establish any sort of commercial like ecotourism in that entire area, and they're like easily startled. So initially, like biologists needed to use military trained dolphins to actually find them, and that just make it extra hard for people to spot them in like a tourism kind of setting. So basically, this is like a very good example of a wicked conservation problem, because it's just there is a lot of things that you think you can do, but once it's got carried out, you always figure out that's not like exactly something that is the most ideal for the protection of this species. And also there's a trade-off between different values on different parties. So there's government value because they need to provide the money for the fishermen if the fishing ban is continued, and then the fishermen needed to support their family because the money that they got is not nearly enough because it's been going on for a long time, and living off compensation is just not the best way to start a life. And biologists is like, this is an important piece of biodiversity, and like also like we don't even know much about vaquitas before they're like on the brink of extinction. And then the next step that biologists are doing is that they're going out to get vaquita samples. so that they could send the vaquita samples, like one male and one female, back to a frozen zoo in San Diego. And then when they froze a lot of animals that are nearly extinct or already extinct, so that in the future, if the technology is like good enough, maybe they can bring some of the species back, but that's just like a backup plan. And even to carry out a backup plan, there is no way if you tell a vaquita whether or not it's like a female or a male without looking at parts. So what they do is just that they randomly go out and find every single vaquita they could ever find. Even if like maybe it's the same vaquita for 2 times, it's the same vaquita for 5 times, they don't know, but they're just getting everything they could get and then send them all back to the lab for test, and hopefully they can get a male and a female. It's like totally a lottery chance. But we know there are males out there because there are cubs being born. So females can't give birth to, female can't mate with female apparently. So there has to be 2 genders out there. And it's just kind of like rolling a dice kind of thing. So it's like a complicated project and it's a complicated story. And that's just kind of like how this entire exhibition goes. So if you look from like the top of the building, it kind of look like that. So that's the world line of each character. And then we have the index of the book, like the wall. And yeah, and this is what it looked like from outside. So just imagine these things are not here. If I actually have the exhibition, those things will not be here. And then the first thing that you see from the outside through the window are the like 4 like quotes kind of sections, but then also because these are the doors and the basically the side is blocked, so without actually walking into the exhibition room, you're not really going to see any of this. Like this entire thing is just behind that wall. So you kind of have the kind of like visual of coming inside, looking at a blank wall with the photo text paper on it, and then you walk over and this all like colorful thing just expanded and for you to explore, I guess. And then there's really not a takeaway that I would, because I got asked this question, like, what is the takeaway that you want people to have once they walk out of the exhibition? Well, I don't think I have that kind of takeaway designed for this particular project because it's all just narrative, and all of the like monologue, like all of the word that's written on the wall is based off what people actually say. So like there is a line dedicated for me. There is a student line that I share my feelings and my reaction to this whole story. But the other section, I'm trying my best to like kind of carry the information from their mouth into your ear kind of thing. So I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you the story. Well, how they're telling you the story themselves, because it's all about different perspective and there are like quotes and everything. So it's not about me telling you how to think. It's not even about me telling you to save the vaquitas in general. It's about the story that is going on. It's just out there. It's just like you go there and experience it yourself, and then whatever that you want to think about it, you can decide it yourself. Like you can like hate the sea shepherd for getting the net out and the fisherman doesn't have a livelihood anymore. You can like not approve the fisherman's activity by like, you know, they attacked sea shepherd with stones, and you can think that like biologists are making a bad decision about capturing the last 30 vaquitas. You can think about all sort of things. It's not something that, it's never something that I can control. Like regardless I'm a scientist or artist or whatever, I can't control what you think outside of exhibition, even though I design it to be seen a certain way, because all our minds are different. So I think what I do is I try my best to reproduce this entire story the way I see it and the way I hear it. And I put my reaction in my personal section because I'm a part of the story as well. I meet with everyone and been following this entire story for about 4 years. But there is really no certain takeaway that I would like the audience to have. Like regardless if you go out and think I'm gonna protect this animal, or I don't care about this, or like I think fishermen are actually very legit about what they do, like it's not something I can control, and it's not something I want to control, because only have one voice to a certain story is as dangerous as not to tell the story as well, like at all. So yeah, that's basically it.
So now we'll do any questions. If y'all have any questions for Iliana, or if you want to prick her brain, you can either unmute yourself and ask or throw them in the chat. I do have a question. Like, what is your favorite part about Akitas? Like, why are you drawn to this animal? Why did you dedicate your project to this?
Well, initially, because they're cute. Aren't they cute? They're so cute. They're just like sea pandas. And okay, how do I get this out? So my sculpture is not the best representation of a Akita, because you only see like half of the thing, and the whole thing is actually very not oriented. But look at it. Isn't that cute? Isn't this cute? It's like the cutest marine mammal I've ever seen. And I think this is like, I was very interested to Akitas when I was studying biology as a major, and all marine mammals in general. And I think it's a really good opportunity for me to experience this transition between biology and documentary, because this is the story that I've been following um, before I started to before I started my MFA and after I started my MFA, and it's like perfectly 2 years and 2 years. And I think it's just like one of these reasons is like I think this is just a very good chance for me to explore things. And also is that I know the subject and I'm interested in the subject beforehand. And also like one of the practical reasons is that I have access to a lot of information about Akitas because of my professor. He's been filming in with like a lot of different aspects. And also like I really love Sea Shepherd and the work that they do, because initially it was going to be a short film about Operation Milagro is their code name. Then it just like gradually turned into this. So it's about a combination of personal interest and scientific background, and the representation of these animals, as in like all the little things that are trying to survive in this big world, like just like what is going on like right now. Like we have this coronavirus, we have this like whole lockdown and everything. Like all we wanted to do is survive, and like it same thing for them. Like they're in this like very dangerous environment, and all they're trying to do is to survive, and they're doing like a poor job so far. um but yeah, that's why I decided to.
What are your next steps now that you have to finish your thesis and graduation is coming up? Like, what are you going to do next?
I have no idea. Well, I had a plan, but that plan was not much of a plan anymore, because everything I was planning to do was actually not, accessible right now. So for the project, my committee chair actually invited me to move the exhibition to Belford after this is all done, to have like a exhibition and reception over there. And I'm working on working with someone that has like architectural like design background to create a virtual space for this, so you can like basically AR the entire space, so that you can click around and then have this exhibition virtually. And also like that give me a chance to work with him and design a space that is actually more fitted for this project. Because right now the space I had in Jameson Gallery, there are like a lot of aspects that I don't really like. For example, the pillars in the middle and the two like big walls on the background. So like the back wall is like a wall, but with like two things that stuck out. Like there are a lot of things, and also the lights and everything. There's just like a lot of things that I think could be better in that gallery, and I could design like a new space just for this exhibition to live off on the internet for like the time being. And there's like a 300-page book that I wrote about this story, and I'm that is my written thesis, but I'm also trying to get it published at some point. So that is for the project kind of part. For life kind of part, I have no clue what's going on. I'm trying to get a visa, and then like I'm trying to get work. Like I have no idea. I had plans before this whole thing went down, and I thought my plan was like not reliable. And then now I realize that my plan was like super duper reliable based on what is going on right now. So I have no clue what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna live with all my animals in the household. That's just how it's gonna go right now.
We have a question in the chat from Michael. As a science communicator using art as a form to speak, what do you think was most productive about your project with relation to non-science audiences understanding your work?
Let me process that question. My brain is not going as.
That's a long question, Michael.
What do you think was more productive about your project with the relation to non-science? Okay, it's just like right now I understand every single word, but it takes me time to understand the whole sentence. But I think like okay, stop laughing. And next time use shorter sentences, okay? So it's about so one, I think like I tend not to use any jargon in my written part or like on the wall or in the book or whatnot, because well I don't want this to be like full on science mode that I talk about, you know, like respiratory system, like reproduction system, all sorts of systems, and then just confuse people, because this is a confusing enough story and I'm not trying to confuse you more with a lot of scientific jargons about what's going on. And I'm trying to bring this story to you, so I want to make it approachable. And also I include like, so what the project that I do and like just purely scientific papers, there are like a lot of differences because like I'm more sort of like a beginning, middle, and end kind of story setting. It's not just about methods and the conclusions and like analysis and all that. It's about the stories behind like all of this, and it's about like a chronicle of what is going on. So I actually applied to like a scholar position in Marine Lab, and my main research idea was to you kind of like talk about the role of documentarian in the field of biology, especially conservation biology, and how to like advocate like, so for scientific research generally there is like one type of output, which is like an article and a paper and like, you know, that kind of area of output. And what if like scientific research has two different kind of output that is consistent? So the scientists produce their own paper, and then like maybe a documentarian that has been along the entire journey produce like a full like body of work, a multimedia work about this entire scientific research, and it can be used in education purposes. It can be used as like it could be used as like even like request for funding, because it makes this entire process more transparent, and it can raise awareness, it can raise funding, it can tell the general public what is going. It can be used in museums, in schools, and all that. But it depends on the this is not the first body of work about science that I did. The first one I did was about lemurs, and Duke Lemur Center is about like scent rolling for male lemurs, I think, and it was a photo series. So I think like different nature of scientific researches can have like a different outcome of media. So it could be a podcast, it could be a film, it could be like something like this, if it's like this complicated. And I think this like kind of alternative outcome thing could be very beneficial to the scientific like world, and also like the for us, like for like students, who are like for people in the museum or whatnot, to understand what is going on out there. And also it's just more or less like shattering existing beliefs of certain things. So like when I talked to my parents before, and my mom just said like I don't understand zoos. Like, all zoos are supposed to be like taking away freedom from animals and all that. But that was like a very outdated idea, because like some zoos and some like research facilities and all that are actually carrying out like conservation works, and there's a difference between zoo enclosures and effective space. And it's just like and also like a lot of animals actually exhibit wild behavior in a zoo. Like, it's just very hard to just say, zoos are all bad. That's kind of the first project I've ever done in my documentary work. But my goal is to just like experiment on different formats and different like storytelling structures, like different everything, to better represent like scientific research in a way that can be more spread out and understood. It has like more channels of showing and more like understandable, so that people don't go out and question like, okay, you have so much money for scientific research, you're just going out to Hawaii and look at some whales. Like, you're taking our money for vacation, which is not true. And so showing that can also like, this whole thing that I talk about, like about commercial value and scientific value. So it could, to some certain degree, generate commercial value out of scientific values, and that might help in like less complicate some wicked stories. Like, if you can't do a ecotourism, maybe you can sell out like film, maybe you can like sell out photograph prints, you can use like some other ways to virtualize this kind of like commercial trips, so that it could also compensate whatever it is. If it's to increase fisherman livelihood, it's fine. If it's like improve scientific research, is fine. But is more or less like a two-way thing, is to help public to understand science, and is to help scientists to like be understood kind of feeling.